Billionaire impregnated his black maid and refused responsibility until he saw the baby's eyes. The pregnancy test clattered into the bathroom sink, and Diane Stratton's world shattered into a million irretrievable pieces. 2 pink lines. Undeniable. Unforgiving. Her hands trembled as she gripped the cold porcelain, staring at her reflection in the gilt-edged mirror of the guest bathroom, the one she'd scrubbed on her hands and knees just yesterday. The irony wasn't lost on her. She cleaned toilets in a $50 million penthouse while the man who owned it had just destroyed her entire future with a carelessness that probably didn't even register in his memory. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to a story that's going to grip your heart and not let go. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Quick question, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing our global family come together. And hey, how are you doing today? Really, I want to know. Before we dive deep into Diane's impossible situation, have you subscribed yet? No? Well, let me tell you, you're going to want to follow this journey all the way through, and I've got so many more stories that'll make you laugh, cry, and believe in the unexpected. Hit that subscribe button and join our family. Trust me, you won't regret it. Now, back to Diane, because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. The penthouse apartment stretched 60 floors above Manhattan, a glass and steel temple to obscene wealth. Diane had worked here for 8 months, invisible among the marble and precious art, just another black woman in a gray uniform making beds and emptying trash for people who had more money than some countries. She'd been so careful. So disciplined. Working 2 jobs, this one during the day, night classes for her nursing degree after. Every dollar saved, every sacrifice calculated. 24 years old with a plan, finish school, get her mother out of that roach-infested apartment in the Bronx, give her little brother the life he deserved. One night. One stupid, reckless, impossible night had incinerated everything. Her phone buzzed. The cleaning service manager. Mrs. Chen needs the master suite deep clean today. Mr. Vandross is working from home. Stay invisible. Diane's stomach lurched. Not just from the morning sickness that had been her constant companion for 3 weeks. Ethan Vandross. The name alone made her skin flush with a confusing cocktail of rage, shame, and something else she refused to name. 32 years old, heir to the Vandross Technologies fortune, with a face that belonged on magazine covers and a conscience that apparently didn't exist at all. She'd tried to tell him last week. Caught him in the hallway, her heart hammering, voice barely steady. Mr. Vandross, I need to speak with you. It's important. It's about that night. He'd looked at her, really looked at her, for exactly 3 seconds. Those storm gray eyes that had once gazed at her with something she'd mistaken for tenderness were now cold, flat, dismissive. I don't know what you're talking about, he'd said, his voice arctic. And I don't appreciate being ambushed by staff with inappropriate requests. If you have a workplace concern, contact the management company. Then he'd walked away, his $1,000 shoes clicking against Italian marble, leaving her standing there with her secret growing inside her and nowhere to turn. Diane pressed her hand against her still flat stomach. A life. Growing. Real. Half hers, half his. A baby he'd just denied existed. She splashed cold water on her face, the tears mixing with the tap water. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not ever. Her shift started in 20 minutes, and she needed this job desperately, at least until she figured out what the hell she was going to do. The master suite was on the opposite end of the penthouse, through a gallery hallway lined with paintings worth more than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes. Diane pushed her cart quietly, her sneakers silent on the heated floors. The door was ajar. She knocked softly. Housekeeping. Come in. His voice. Clipped. Distracted. Diane's pulse spiked, but she steadied herself and entered. Ethan sat at his desk by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Manhattan skyline sprawling behind him like a kingdom he owned. He didn't look up from his laptop. Didn't acknowledge her existence beyond those 2 words of permission. She was invisible again. Exactly as she should be. As she'd always been to him, except for one night when the rules had shattered. It had been late. A charity gala had just ended. Diane had been called in for emergency cleanup after the caterers left. Ethan had returned unexpectedly, loosening his bow tie, smelling of expensive scotch and something darker. Loneliness, maybe. They'd talked. Actually talked. About her dreams, her family, her fears. He'd listened like she mattered, looked at her like she was visible, truly visible, for the first time. One conversation became one touch. One touch became one kiss. One kiss became one night that she'd replayed 1,000 times, trying to understand how something so tender had transformed into this cold denial. Diane began stripping the bed, her movements mechanical. She could feel his presence across the room like electricity, every cell in her body aware of him. "How long have you worked here?" His question startled her. She looked up. Ethan was watching her now, his expression unreadable. Those gray eyes that haunted her dreams were focused entirely on her face. 8 months, sir, she answered quietly. And before that? Why was he asking? What game was this? Another cleaning service. Before that, retail. I'm putting myself through school. He nodded slowly, his gaze never wavering. Nursing, right? Her breath caught. He remembered. Hope fluttered stupidly in her chest, maybe he would listen, maybe he would. My assistant mentioned it when reviewing staff files, he continued, tone professionally distant. Admirable. Hard work. Ambition. I respect that. The hope died as quickly as it had sparked. He'd looked her up in a file. She was data. A liability to be assessed. Thank you, sir, she managed. Diane. Her name in his mouth was complicated. If you have something to say to me, say it now. We're alone. This was it. Her moment. Maybe her only chance. She straightened, met his eyes directly. I'm pregnant. It's yours. That night after the gala. Stop. The word cracked like a whip. He stood, his 6'3" frame suddenly imposing, his expression hardening into something cruel. I don't know what kind of scheme this is, but I'm not interested. Do you know how many women have tried exactly this? Claiming pregnancies, fabricating connections, hoping for a payday? I'm not lying. I used protection, he cut her off coldly. And even if I hadn't, I have no memory of anything inappropriate happening with staff. You're making a serious accusation that could destroy your career and reputation. Each word was a knife. I'm not asking for money, Diane said, her voice shaking but determined. I'm asking you to acknowledge the truth. To take responsibility for. Responsibility? He laughed, the sound bitter. For what? A fantasy you've constructed? A mistake you made with someone else that you're trying to pin on me? The cruelty was stunning. This wasn't the man who'd held her that night, who'd whispered about how beautiful she was, how real she made him feel. I know what happened, Diane said quietly. So do you. What I know, Ethan said, his voice dropping dangerously low, is that you're a maid with access to my private spaces, my personal life. What I know is that this conversation is over. Finish your work and leave. If you bring this up again, I'll have you fired and blacklisted from every service in the city. Do we understand each other? The threat hung in the air between them. Diane felt something crack inside her chest, not her will, but her last remaining illusion about who Ethan Vandross really was. Perfectly, she whispered. She turned back to the bed, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, she heard him return to his desk, the click of his keyboard resuming as if she'd never spoken at all. But as she smoothed the Egyptian cotton sheets with shaking hands, Diane made a silent vow. She would survive this. She would protect this baby growing inside her. And one day, somehow, someway, Ethan Vandross would see the truth he was so desperate to deny. She just didn't know that the truth, when it finally came, would be staring back at him through a pair of unmistakable gray eyes that mirrored his own. 3 months crawled by like years. Diane's scrubs grew tighter, her secret harder to hide. She'd switched to looser uniforms, strategic layering, anything to buy herself more time before the inevitable showed. The morning sickness had finally eased, replaced by an exhaustion that lived in her bones and a terror that woke her at 3 a.m. every single night. She hadn't seen Ethan Vandross since that day in his bedroom. He'd left for Singapore 2 days after their confrontation, some massive tech deal that had his face plastered across the financial news. His penthouse remained empty except for the ghosts of what might have been, cleaned now by other staff members while Diane was quietly reassigned to different properties in the building. Her manager, Mrs. Patterson, hadn't given a reason for the change. Didn't need to. Diane understood the message: stay away. Stay invisible. Stay silent. But silence had a price, and Diane was paying it in every possible way. You look terrible, baby. Her mother, Joyce Stratton, studied her across the tiny kitchen table in their Bronx apartment. At 53, Joyce looked 70, decades of factory work and single motherhood etched into every line of her beautiful, exhausted face. But her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. I'm fine, Mama. Just tired from classes and work. Don't lie to your mother. Joyce reached across the chipped formica, taking Diane's hand. Her fingers were rough, scarred from industrial accidents and hard labor. I raised you. I know when something's wrong. Diane's 15-year-old brother, Kevin, looked up from his homework at the counter. He was all lanky limbs and basketball dreams, a straight-A student who deserved so much more than this cramped apartment with sirens screaming outside and roaches in the walls. This was why she'd worked so hard. Why she'd sacrificed everything. To get them out. And now? I'm pregnant, Diane said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kevin's eyes went wide. Joyce's hand tightened around her daughter's. Who's the father? Joyce asked, her voice carefully controlled. It doesn't matter. He doesn't want anything to do with it. The hell it doesn't matter. Joyce's composure cracked. Some man got you pregnant and just walked away? Who is he, Diane? Does he know? Did you tell him? I told him. Diane's voice broke. He called me a liar. Threatened to have me fired and blacklisted if I ever brought it up again. Joyce stood abruptly, her chair scraping against linoleum. What's his name? I don't care how much money he has or how powerful he thinks he is. Mama, please. Diane wiped at her eyes. It won't change anything. He's rich. Really rich. Connected. If I push this, I'll lose everything, my job, my reputation, maybe any chance at finishing school. And then how do I take care of this baby? The fight drained from Joyce's face, replaced by a grief that was somehow worse. She knew. She understood. She'd been powerless against the world's cruelties too many times herself. So what are you going to do? Joyce whispered. I'm going to have this baby, Diane said, her hand moving to her stomach protectively. I'm going to finish my degree somehow. I'm going to work. And I'm going to give my child the best life I possibly can. Without him. Kevin abandoned his homework and crossed to her, wrapping his sister in a fierce hug. We'll help, he said, his voice cracking with adolescent certainty. Me and Mama. We're family. We got you. Diane held her little brother and let herself cry, for the dreams she'd lost, for the future she'd have to rebuild, for the baby growing inside her who would never know their father. But beneath the tears, something else grew too. Something harder. Stronger. Determination. Across town, in a glass office tower that pierced the Manhattan sky, Ethan Vandross stared at the contracts in front of him without seeing a single word. You're distracted. His best friend and CFO, Liam Chen, leaned against the doorframe of Ethan's corner office. They'd known each other since Harvard built Vandross Technologies' latest division together, and Liam was one of maybe 3 people on Earth who could read Ethan's moods. "I'm fine," Ethan lied. "You've been fine for 3 months." Which in Ethan speak means something's eating you alive and you're too stubborn to talk about it. Liam settled into the chair across from him. "Is it the merger? The board? Your father?" "All 3, actually." But none of them were what kept Ethan awake at night. It was a pair of dark brown eyes. A voice that had shaken when she'd said, "I'm pregnant." "It's yours." A truth he'd denied so viciously he'd almost convinced himself he believed his own lies. "Just tired," Ethan said, closing the contract folder. "The Singapore deal took everything out of me." "Bullshit." Liam studied him. "I've seen you negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions on 3 hours of sleep and still have energy to spare. This is something else. Something personal." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Drop it. Is it a woman?" The question landed like a punch. Ethan's silence was answer enough. "Holy shit, it is." Liam leaned forward, genuinely surprised. The great Ethan Vandross, finally human. "Who is she? Someone from the charity circuit? That venture capitalist you were seeing?" "I wasn't seeing anyone," Ethan said sharply. "There's no one. It was nothing. A mistake." "A mistake that's haunting you 3 months later?" "I'm pregnant." "It's yours." Ethan stood abruptly, crossing to the windows. Manhattan sprawled below, millions of lives intersecting and separating, each one convinced their story mattered. From up here, they all looked like ants. He'd built this empire, expanded his father's tech legacy into something that actually mattered, that changed lives. He'd done it through discipline, focus, walls so carefully constructed that nothing messy or unpredictable could penetrate. And then Diane Stratton had appeared in his penthouse after midnight, still in her cleaning uniform, and somehow in the space of an hour, she'd slipped through every defense he'd ever built. He'd been drunk. Lonely. Fresh from a gala where he'd been paraded around like a prize stallion, women eyeing his bank account while pretending to find him charming. He'd come home exhausted by the performance, by the emptiness of it all. And there she was. Real. Honest. Talking about night school and dreams and taking care of her family with this fierce determination that made his own accomplishments feel hollow. He'd kissed her. She'd kissed him back. And for one night, Ethan had felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Human. The next morning, reality had crashed back. The power differential. The impossibility. The danger of it. If anyone found out, his father, the board, the media, it would be a scandal that could damage everything he'd built. So he'd done what Vandrosses always did, denied, dismissed, destroyed the evidence. Except the evidence was apparently growing inside her, and Ethan couldn't stop thinking about it. "Did something happen?" Liam asked quietly. "Something you're not telling me?" Ethan's reflection stared back at him from the window glass, a man who had everything and felt increasingly like he had nothing. "If someone told you something," he said slowly, "something that could change everything, but acknowledging it would complicate your entire life, destroy plans, create chaos, what would you do?" "Is it true?" Liam asked. "What?" "Whatever they told you. Is it true?" Ethan closed his eyes. He'd used protection that night. He remembered that clearly. But he also remembered it breaking, remembered the moment of panic they'd both dismissed in the heat of passion, telling themselves the odds were astronomical, that one mistake couldn't possibly. "I don't know," he whispered. "Then maybe you should find out," Liam said. "Before you drive yourself insane with denial." But finding out meant seeing her again. Meant confronting what he'd done, both that night and in the 3 months since. Meant potentially facing a truth that would detonate his carefully ordered existence. Ethan Vandross had built an empire on calculated risks and strategic decisions. This felt like the most dangerous gamble of his life. Diane's phone rang at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. She fumbled for it in the dark, heart racing. Late-night calls were never good news. Hello? Is this Diane Stratton? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Yes, who? This is Mount Sinai Hospital. Your mother, Joyce Stratton, was brought in an hour ago. Cardiac event. You're listed as her emergency contact. The world tilted. Diane was out of bed, pulling on clothes, her hands shaking so badly she could barely manage the zipper. Kevin appeared in her doorway, sleepy and confused. What's wrong? It's Mama, Diane said, her voice hollow. Her heart. I have to go. I'm coming with you. No. You have school. Stay here, I'll call you. I'm coming, Kevin repeated, already grabbing his shoes. They took 2 subway transfers and ran the last 3 blocks. Diane's lungs burned, her pregnant body protesting the pace, but terror pushed her forward. The emergency room was fluorescent and cold. A nurse directed them to a cardiac unit on the 4th floor. Joyce looked so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Mama, Diane whispered, taking her mother's hand. Joyce's eyes fluttered open. Baby. You shouldn't be here. You need rest. Shoo. I'm exactly where I should be. A doctor appeared, young and exhausted. Miss Stratton? I'm Dr. Patel. Your mother had a significant cardiac episode. We've stabilized her, but she needs surgery. A bypass. Soon. How soon? This week. Maybe sooner if we can get in her slot. And the cost? Diane's voice was barely audible. Dr. Patel glanced at his tablet. Your mother has basic Medicaid coverage, which will handle some of it, but with the specialists required and post-op care, you're looking at significant out-of-pocket costs. Probably $40,000 to $60,000. The number hit Diane like a physical blow. $40,000. She had maybe $3,000 in savings. Kevin's college fund had another $2,000. Nowhere near enough. We'll figure it out, Diane said numbly. Do whatever she needs. After the doctor left, Joyce gripped Diane's hand weakly. Baby, no. That's too much. You've got your own situation now, the baby coming. Mama, stop. I'm not losing you. Whatever it takes. But as Diane sat there in the cold hospital room, her mother's life hanging in the balance and her own future already so precarious, she felt the walls closing in. No job could pay for this. No loan would cover it, not for someone with her income and credit. She had one option. One path she'd sworn she'd never take. Ethan Vandross had denied his child. Had threatened her. Had made it crystal clear he wanted nothing to do with her or the life they'd created. But he also had money. More money than he could ever spend. And Diane's mother was dying. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She would go back to him. She would beg if she had to. Not for herself, never for herself, but for Joyce. For Kevin. For the baby growing inside her who deserved a grandmother. Ethan Vandross had refused responsibility once. Tomorrow, Diane would make sure he couldn't refuse again. She just had no idea that tomorrow, everything would change in ways neither of them could possibly predict. Diane stood outside Vandross Technologies at 7 in the morning, her coffee untouched and going cold in her trembling hand. The building was a monument to wealth and power, 43 stories of steel and glass that reflected the rising sun like a beacon. People in expensive suits streamed through the revolving doors, confident and purposeful, belonging to a world Diane had only ever observed from the outside. She didn't belong here. The security guards would probably laugh her right back onto the street. But Joyce was scheduled for surgery in 4 days, and the hospital's finance office had made it brutally clear, without a substantial deposit, her mother would be moved to a different facility with a 6-week waiting list. Joyce didn't have 6 weeks. Her heart was failing. Diane took a breath and walked through those revolving doors. The lobby was marble and modern art, everything cold and intimidating. A security desk dominated the center, flanked by 2 guards who looked like they could bench press her entire life. "Can I help you?" The older guard's tone was polite but dismissive, already categorizing her as lost or confused. "I'm here to see Ethan Vandross." "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but Mr. Vandross doesn't take walk-ins. If you'd like to schedule something, you can contact his executive assistant through the website." The guard was already turning away, conversation over. "Please." Diane's voice cracked. "Please, just tell him Diane Stratton is here. He needs to know I'm here." The guard exchanged a look with his partner, the universal expression of security personnel dealing with another delusional person who thought they had special access to the billionaire upstairs. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't have an appointment. I'm carrying his child." The words exploded into the pristine lobby. Several people in suits turned to stare. The guard's expression shifted from dismissive to alarmed. "Ma'am, you need to leave right now, or I'm calling the police." "I'm not lying. 3 months ago, at his penthouse." "Security." The guard was already reaching for his radio. Diane felt hands on her arms, firm, professional, inexorable. They were walking her toward the doors, and she was too exhausted, too desperate, too defeated to fight. "Wait." The voice cut through the lobby like a whip. Everyone froze. Liam Chin strode across the marble, his expression unreadable. He'd been heading toward the elevators but had stopped, apparently drawn by the commotion. "Let her go," Liam said quietly. "Mr. Chen, this woman is making inappropriate claims." "I said let her go." The authority in his voice was absolute. The guards released Diane immediately. Liam studied her with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You're Diane Stratton." It wasn't a question. Somehow, he knew. "Yes," she whispered. "Come with me." He turned without waiting for an answer, and Diane followed because she had no other choice. They rode the elevator in silence to the 38th floor, emerged into a corridor of glass offices and hushed efficiency. Liam led her past assistants and conference rooms to a door at the end of the hall. He knocked once, then entered. Ethan Vandross sat behind a desk that probably cost more than a car, his attention focused on multiple monitors displaying data Diane couldn't begin to understand. He looked up, irritation flashing across his features. Then he saw her. Every emotion crossed his face in less than a second, shock, anger, fear, something else she couldn't name, before his expression locked down into cold neutrality. "What is she doing here?" His voice was ice. "She was making a scene in the lobby," Liam said calmly. "Claiming to be pregnant with your child. I thought you might want to handle this privately rather than let security call the police and create exactly the kind of publicity nightmare you've been so worried about." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Get out." "Ethan. Get out." Liam looked between them, then nodded slowly. "I'll be in my office." Listening distance. The warning was clear, he was giving them privacy, but not total freedom. The door clicked shut. Ethan stood, his 6'3" frame radiating controlled fury. "I told you what would happen if you contacted me again. Do you want to be arrested? Blacklisted? Destroyed?" "My mother is dying," Diane said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "She needs heart surgery. $40,000. I don't have it. I've tried everything, loans, payment plans, everything. She has 4 days before they move her to a waiting list that will kill her. And you thought you'd come shake me down?" Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Threaten to go public unless I pay? That's extortion, Diane. That's a felony." "I'm not threatening anything." The words burst out of her. "I'm begging. I'm literally begging you. Not for me, I would never ask you for anything for myself, But my mother is a good person who's worked herself to death for me and my brother, and she doesn't deserve to die because I can't afford to save her. So get a loan. Fundraise. Sell something. That's not my problem. I'm 4 months pregnant with your baby. Diane's composure finally shattered. You can deny it all you want, but you know the truth. You were there. You remember. And I'm not asking you to be a father or acknowledge this child or have anything to do with us. I just need help saving my mother's life. You want $40,000 in exchange for your silence, Ethan said coldly. That's the deal? I pay, and you disappear? The calculation in his eyes made Diane feel filthy. If that's how you need to see it, she whispered. Yes. Ethan crossed to his desk, pulled out a checkbook, an actual checkbook, because apparently Billionaire still used those, and began writing. The scratch of pen on paper was the only sound in the office. He tore the check free and held it out. Diane took it with shaking hands. $40,000. Made out to Mount Sinai Hospital. Enough to save Joyce's life. Thank you, she breathed. Thank you so much, There are conditions, Ethan interrupted. You will sign a non-disclosure agreement. You will never contact me again. You will never claim this child as mine, not to family, not to friends, not to the media, not even to the child themselves. If you violate any of these terms, you will repay every cent with interest, and I will pursue legal action that will bankrupt you and your entire family. Are we clear? Each condition was a knife to the heart. What about the baby? Diane asked. Don't you want to know? I don't care, Ethan said flatly. I don't want to know. This transaction ends our association permanently. My attorney will contact you by end of business today with the NDA. Sign it, cash the check, and forget I exist. Diane stared at the man she'd thought she'd glimpsed that night, the one who'd been vulnerable and real and human. He was gone completely, if he'd ever existed at all. You're really that cold, she whispered. That heartless? I'm a businessman making a business decision. You came here asking for money. I'm giving it to you. Everything else is fantasy you've constructed. I loved you. The words escaped before Diane could stop them. That night, I thought we connected. That you saw me. That I mattered. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, pain, regret, guilt, but it vanished almost instantly. You were an employee. I was drunk. You built a fairy tale out of a mistake. Take the money, Diane, and move on with your life. The dismissal was absolute. Diane folded the check carefully, slipping it into her purse. Her hands were steady now, her eyes dry. Something inside her had calcified into something harder than diamond. I'll sign your NDA, she said quietly. I'll take your money and I'll disappear. But know this, Ethan Vandross, one day, you're going to regret this. One day, you're going to see what you threw away. And when that day comes, when you finally understand what you've lost, I won't be there. I won't care. And neither will your child. She turned toward the door. Diane. She stopped but didn't turn around. I hope your mother recovers, Ethan said, and for the first time, his voice held something other than ice. I genuinely do. No, you don't, Diane said. Because if you did, you'd be capable of caring about another human being. And we both know you're not. She walked out without looking back. The moment the door closed, Ethan collapsed into his chair, his hands shaking. Liam entered immediately. I heard most of that. Good for you. She's pregnant, isn't she? Actually pregnant. With your child. Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't. Jesus Christ, Ethan. Liam sat down heavily. What the hell are you doing? Protecting myself. Protecting the company. Protecting everything we'd built from a scandal that could destroy it all. By abandoning your own child? It's not, Ethan stopped, the lie dying on his lips. I don't know if it's mine. You know, Liam said quietly. I can see it in your face. You know exactly what happened that night, and you know she's telling the truth. Ethan's head dropped into his hands. My father would disown me. The board would force me out. The media would have a field day. Billionaire impregnates his maid, refuses responsibility. Everything I've worked for, everything I built, gone. So you're choosing the empire over your humanity. I'm choosing survival. No, Liam said. You're choosing fear. There's a difference. Ethan looked up at his best friend, the only person who'd ever really known him. What would you do? If you were me? I'd be terrified, Liam admitted. But I'd also recognize that sometimes the right choice and the easy choice aren't the same thing. And I'd ask myself what kind of man I want to be when I look in the mirror 20 years from now. A successful one, Ethan said bitterly. A powerful one. Not a cautionary tale. You gave her $40,000, Liam observed. You could have given her nothing. Could have had security throw her out. But you wrote that check. Why? Because the thought of her mother dying had physically hurt. Because Diane's pain had been real and raw and impossible to ignore. Because despite everything, some part of him still remembered how she'd felt in his arms, how she'd made him feel seen in a way no one else ever had. Guilt, Ethan said. Nothing more. If you say so. Liam stood. But for what it's worth, I think you just made the biggest mistake of your life. And I think you know it. After Liam left, Ethan sat alone in his empire of glass and steel, looking out over the city he'd conquered. He'd won. He'd protected himself, maintained control, eliminated the threat. So why did victory feel exactly like loss? Diane deposited the check at the hospital's finance office, signed the surgery authorization, and held her mother's hand as they prepped her for the operating room. Where did you get the money, baby? Joyce asked, her voice drowsy from the pre-op medication. Don't worry about it, Mama. Everything's taken care of. You didn't do anything. I did what I had to do, Diane said firmly. And I'd do it again. Now you focus on getting through this surgery and coming back to me and Kevin. We need you. Joyce's eyes filled with tears. I love you so much. I love you too, Mama. They wheeled Joyce away, and Diane sat in the waiting room with Kevin, her hand pressed to her growing belly. She'd sold her silence. Her child's right to a father. Her own dignity. But Joyce would live. And sometimes, that was the only choice that mattered. 4 hours later, Dr. Patel emerged, still in surgical scrubs, his face exhausted but smiling. The surgery went perfectly. Your mother's going to be fine. Diane burst into tears, and Kevin held her while she sobbed out all the fear and grief and relief she'd been holding inside. Joyce would live. The baby would have a grandmother. And Ethan Vandross could go to hell. 6 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived at Diane's apartment. The NDA, as promised. 20 pages of legal language that essentially said she would never speak Ethan's name again in connection with her child. Diane signed every page without reading them, her signature steady and clear. She was done with Ethan Vandross. But the baby growing inside her, already kicking, already real, already loved, carried half his DNA. And Diane had no idea that genetics were about to play a role neither of them could have predicted. A role that would change everything. Again. 5 months later. Diane had never felt more exhausted or more alive. Her daughter, because the ultrasound had confirmed a girl, was due in 3 weeks. Diane had finished her semester somehow, through sheer stubborn will, though she'd had to defer the next one. Money was tight. Beyond tight. Joyce had recovered from surgery but couldn't work full-time anymore, which meant Diane was supporting 3 people on maternity leave from the cleaning service and whatever part-time remote work she could find. The nursery, such as it was, consisted of a second-hand crib wedged into the corner of her bedroom and a dresser painted cheerful yellow by Kevin. Diane had washed all the baby clothes, gifts from Joyce's church friends and thrift store finds, until they were soft and clean, folded them with hands that shook with anticipation and terror. She was going to be a mother. Alone. Exactly as Ethan had wanted. Diane hadn't thought about him in weeks. Or that's what she told herself during the day. At night, when the baby kicked and turned inside her, she sometimes wondered if he ever thought about this child. If he ever regretted the choice he'd made. Probably not. Men like Ethan Vandross didn't do regret. They did power and control and moved forward without looking back. You ready for your appointment? Joyce appeared in the doorway, moving slowly but steadily. The surgery had saved her life, though she'd never quite regained her former energy. Yeah, just let me grab my bag. Diane leveraged herself off the bed, a production now that she was massive and ungainly. Her OB wanted to do one final check before the due date, make sure everything was progressing normally. The clinic was in a different part of the city, one of the free women's health centers that served low-income patients. Diane had excellent prenatal care despite having no money, thanks to Medicaid and doctors who actually gave a damn. Dr. Sarah Okoye was one of those doctors, a Nigerian immigrant in her 40s who treated every patient like they mattered, regardless of insurance status. How are we feeling, Diane? Dr. Okoye asked, her accent musical as she measured Diane's belly. Huge. Ready to meet her. Terrified. All perfectly normal. Dr. Okoye smiled. Let's take a look at this little one. The ultrasound machine hummed to life. The gel was cold on Diane's stretched skin. And then there she was, her daughter, fully formed, perfect, real. Diane's breath caught every single time. Everything looks excellent, Dr. Okoye murmured, taking measurements. Good size, strong heartbeat, positioned well. You should have a smooth delivery. Should? Diane caught the qualifier. Well, there's always variability, but I'm not seeing anything concerning. Your daughter is healthy and, Dr. Okoye paused, leaning closer to the screen. What? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Dr. Okoye said quickly. I'm just noticing. Diane, have you or the father ever been tested for genetic conditions? Particularly ocular albinism or unusual eye pigmentation genetics? Diane's heart stuttered. No. Why? I'm seeing some indicators that suggest your daughter may have very distinctive eye coloring. It's rare but not harmful, just unusual. Sometimes it runs in families. Light eyes, possibly gray or very pale blue. The world tilted. Gray eyes. Like Ethan's. The father has gray eyes, Diane whispered. Very distinctive. Everyone notices them. Dr. Okoye nodded. Then this little one probably inherited that trait. It's actually quite beautiful when you see it, she'll likely have eyes exactly like her father's. Exactly like her father's. The father who'd denied her existence. Who'd paid Diane to disappear. Who'd demanded she never tell anyone, including the child herself, who he was. How the hell was Diane supposed to explain her daughter's unmistakable Vandross eyes? Across the city, Ethan stood in his father's office, feeling like he was 16 again and being lectured about responsibility. Richard Vandross was 72, silver-haired, and ruthless. He'd built Vandross Technologies from a small software company into a global empire, and he'd raised his only son to be just as hard, just as uncompromising. The merger with Chin Industries is critical, Richard said, pacing behind his mahogany desk. Liam's father is willing to bring their AI division under our umbrella, but he's nervous about leadership succession. He wants assurances that you're stable. Focused. Not going to embarrass the family name with scandals. I'm aware, Ethan said tightly. Are you? Richard's eyes, the same distinctive gray that Ethan had inherited, pinned him in place. Because I've been hearing rumors. A woman in the lobby 6 months ago, making claims. Security incidents. Payoffs. Ethan's blood ran cold. That was handled. Quietly. It won't be an issue. It better not be. You know what's at stake. This merger will position us to dominate the next decade of tech development. But one whiff of scandal, a harassment claim, a paternity suit, anything, and the Chens will walk. Their reputation is spotless, and they won't associate with controversy. There won't be any controversy, Ethan said. I made sure of it. Richard studied his son with eyes that missed nothing. Did you? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Yes, Ethan said firmly. Whatever you heard, it's over. Done. Not a threat. Good. Because you're not just representing yourself anymore. Every decision you make affects thousands of employees, billions in market value, the family legacy. Your personal life doesn't get to be personal when you're a Vandross. You understand that, don't you? I've always understood that, Ethan said quietly. It was the truth. He'd been raised understanding that being a Vandross meant sacrifice. Meant putting the empire first, always. Personal desires, individual happiness, those were luxuries for other people. His mother had understood. She'd married Richard for position and produced the required heir, then retreated into charity work and separate bedrooms. She'd died when Ethan was 12, a car accident, officially, though Ethan sometimes wondered if it had been something else. An escape from a life that had slowly suffocated her. Ethan had sworn he'd never be trapped like that. Never marry for duty, never have children to satisfy family expectations. And then one night, he'd forgotten every rule he'd ever made. The formal announcement of the merger is in 3 months, Richard continued. I want you visible, stable, ideally with a suitable woman on your arm. Someone from the right circles. Someone who understands how this world works. You want me to find a wife in 3 months? Ethan couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. I want you to find someone appropriate for public appearances. Whether it becomes more is up to you, but the optics matter. Liam will be doing the same, his father is pushing him toward the senator's daughter. You should consider similar options. The idea of parading around with some society woman who saw him as a business opportunity made Ethan's skin crawl. But that was the deal. That was the life. I'll handle it, he said. After leaving his father's office, Ethan retreated to his own, closing the door and loosening his tie. His hands were shaking. 6 months since he'd seen Diane. 6 months since he'd written that check and watched her walk away. He'd kept tabs, discreetly. Had someone monitor social media, make sure she wasn't violating the NDA. The reports were always the same, nothing. She'd disappeared completely, kept her word, taken his money and vanished. Exactly what he'd wanted. So why did it feel like he'd amputated a part of himself? You look like hell. Liam appeared with 2 cups of coffee, handing one over. Let me guess, your father gave you the find a suitable wife speech? Among other things. Mine too. Apparently, we're both supposed to be coupled up for the merger announcement. Nothing says stable leadership like trophy wives and traditional family values. Liam's voice dripped sarcasm. You going to do it? Probably take Charlotte Dumont to a few events. Senator's daughter, Harvard Law, knows the game. We'll smile for cameras, make no actual commitment, and go our separate ways after the merger closes. Liam paused. What about you? Ethan thought about the society women he dated over the years. Beautiful, polished, utterly interchangeable. Not one of them had ever looked at him the way Diane had, like he was a person, not a portfolio. I'll figure something out, he said. You could also just tell your father the truth, Liam suggested quietly. That you're going to be a father yourself in, what, a few months? Weeks, Ethan corrected before he could stop himself. She was already 4 months when she came here. So probably, soon. The knowledge sat in his chest like a weight. Somewhere in this city, Diane was about to give birth. To his child. A son or daughter he'd never meet, never know, never acknowledge. He'd made sure of that. And you're okay with this? Liam asked. Really? I don't have a choice. everyone has a choice, Ethan. You're just choosing the empire over everything else. Like always. That's what Vandrosses do, Ethan said. That's who we are. No, Liam said. That's who your father is. It doesn't have to be who you are. After Liam left, Ethan pulled up the private investigator's latest report on his computer. It was a violation of the NDA's spirit, maybe, but he needed to know she was okay. Subject, Diane Stratton. Status, 3rd trimester pregnancy, approximately 37 weeks. Living at same Bronx address with mother, post-surgical recovery, stable, and brother, high school sophomore, honors student. Subject working limited hours remotely, appears to be preparing for birth. No public statements regarding pregnancy or paternity. No social media activity mentioning client. No contact with media or legal representation. The report was clinical, factual, revealing nothing of what Diane was actually experiencing. Was she scared? Excited? Did she hate him? Did she think about him at all? Was the baby healthy? Ethan had no right to know. He'd forfeited that right when he'd handed her that check and demanded her silence. But the questions haunted him anyway. Diane went into labor on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before her due date. The contractions started mild, almost ignorable, while she was making breakfast. By noon, they were regular and insistent. By 3 p.m., her water broke, and Joyce was calling 911 while Kevin ran around the apartment in a panic. "It's okay, baby," Joyce kept saying, holding Diane's hand in the ambulance. "You're going to be okay. You're strong. You got this." But Diane was terrified. She was about to become a mother. Alone. No partner to hold her hand, no father to pace the waiting room, just her and this baby against the world. The labor was long and brutal, 16 hours of pain that erased thought, erased everything except the primal push to bring this life into the world. And then, at 7:23 a.m. on Wednesday, her daughter was born. The nurses cleaned her quickly, did their assessments, and placed her on Diane's chest. She was tiny and perfect, with a cap of dark hair and skin the color of warm honey, a beautiful blend of Diane's deep brown and whatever genetic contribution Ethan had made. "She's perfect," the nurse said. "Absolutely perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, healthy lungs, you hear those lungs, and the most unusual eyes I've ever seen. Can I see her?" Diane whispered, exhausted and exhilarated. The nurse adjusted the baby so Diane could see her face. And Diane's heart stopped. Her daughter's eyes were open, newborns usually kept them closed, but not this one. She was staring up at Diane with eyes that were unmistakable, impossible to explain away. Pale gray. Distinctive. Striking. Ethan's eyes, copied perfectly into this tiny face. "Oh my God," Diane breathed. "Told you they were unusual," the nurse said cheerfully. "Most babies have dark blue eyes at birth that change later, but every once in a while you get one born with light eyes like this. She's going to turn heads her whole life." Yes, Diane thought numbly. She was. Because anyone who'd ever seen Ethan Vandross would take one look at this baby and know exactly whose daughter she was. The NDA was suddenly worthless. How could Diane hide the father's identity when it was literally staring out of her daughter's face? "What are you naming her?" the nurse asked. Diane looked down at her daughter, her miracle, her future, the best thing she'd ever done. "Isabella," she whispered. "Isabella Grace Stratton." Isabella made a small sound, her tiny hand wrapping around Diane's finger with surprising strength. "Hello, Isabella," Diane said softly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama. And I promise you, sweet girl, I will give you the best life I possibly can. You don't need a father who doesn't want you. You have me, and Grandma Joyce, and Uncle Kevin. You have so much love already." But even as she said it, Diane wondered how she was going to explain those eyes. And what would happen when, not if, when Ethan Vandross eventually saw them. The photo appeared on Liam's phone first. He was in a meeting with Ethan, reviewing merger contracts, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thought you might want to see this before it circulates. A friend. Below was a photo, clearly taken in a hospital. A young black woman holding a newborn baby, both of them exhausted and beautiful. Diane and her daughter. Liam's breath caught. The baby's eyes were open, staring at the camera. Gray eyes. Unmistakable Vandross gray eyes. What is it? Ethan asked, noticing Liam's expression. Liam hesitated. This was it, the moment that would either force Ethan to face reality or push him deeper into denial. She had the baby, Liam said quietly. A daughter. Ethan went very still. How do you know? Liam turned his phone around, showing Ethan the photo. The color drained from Ethan's face. Those are my eyes, he whispered. Yes, Liam said. They are. Ethan stared at the photo, at this tiny person he'd tried so hard to pretend didn't exist. A daughter. His daughter. Staring at the camera with his eyes. Who sent this? Ethan's voice was hoarse. I don't know. Someone who wants you to know. Someone who thinks you should care. I signed an NDA. Ethan, look at her. Liam's patience finally snapped. Look at your daughter. You can have all the NDAs in the world, but genetics don't lie. Anyone who sees this baby is going to know she's yours. And when your father sees her, when the board sees her, when the media sees her, what then? Ethan couldn't breathe. The baby in the photo was real. Concrete. Undeniable. His daughter. And she had his eyes. The eyes that had been in his family for generations. The distinctive Vandross gray that his father had, that his grandfather had, that marked every heir in family portraits going back 100 years. He thought he could walk away. Thought money and legal documents would make this disappear. But you couldn't make genetics disappear. What do I do? Ethan asked, and for the first time in 6 months, he sounded lost. You do what you should have done from the beginning, Liam said. You go see your daughter. You face what you've done. And you figure out what kind of man you actually want to be. Ethan looked at the photo again, at those impossible gray eyes staring back at him. His daughter. Isabella. He didn't know her name yet. Didn't know anything about her except that she existed, that she was real, and that running from her was no longer an option. The empire he'd built his entire life around suddenly felt very small compared to the tiny face on Liam's phone. And Ethan Vandross, for the first time in his life, had absolutely no idea what to do next. Ethan stood outside Mount Sinai Hospital for 20 minutes before he found the courage to go inside. He'd left the office without explanation, ignoring his assistant's protests about the afternoon schedule. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the impossible pull drawing him toward the maternity ward and a truth he could no longer deny. The receptionist directed him to room 412. His feet felt like lead as he walked down the sterile corridor, past rooms filled with new families, new beginnings, joy he'd convinced himself he didn't want. He stopped outside Diane's door. Through the small window, he could see her sleeping, the baby in a bassinet beside the bed. Joy sat in a chair by the window, her eyes closed. The scene was peaceful, complete without him. Ethan raised his hand to knock, then froze. What the hell was he doing? He had no right to be here. He'd made his choice. Paid her off. Demanded silence. He was the villain in this story, and villains didn't get redemption through a hospital visit. He should leave. Walk away like he'd planned from the beginning. His hand knocked before his brain could stop it. Joyce's eyes snapped open. She saw him through the window, and her expression transformed from confusion to recognition to pure fury. She stood quickly, moving to the door and slipping into the hallway, pulling it shut behind her. You have a lot of nerve showing up here, Joyce said, her voice low and dangerous. After what you did to my daughter. I know. I need to see. See what? The baby you denied? The child you threw money at to make disappear? Joy stepped closer, and despite being a foot shorter than Ethan, her presence was formidable. Diane nearly broke herself trying to protect you, signing your papers, keeping your secrets. And now you want to waltz in because what? Guilt finally caught up with you? I saw her eyes, Ethan said quietly. In a photo. She has my eyes. She has your everything, Joy snapped. Your eyes, your nose, your stubborn chin. One look at that baby and anyone with sense can see exactly who her father is. But that didn't matter to you 6 months ago, did it? When Diane was begging you for help and you called her a liar. Each word was deserved. Each accusation true. I was wrong, Ethan said. I was a coward, and I was wrong, and his voice cracked. Please. Let me see her. Just once. Joy studied him with eyes that had seen too much hardship to be easily fooled. Why? So you can feel better about yourself? So you can check a box and go back to your empire with a clear conscience? No. I don't know. Ethan struggled to find words for the chaos in his chest. I haven't been able to breathe right since Diane walked out of my office. I convinced myself I was protecting everything I'd built, but all I've done is destroy the one real thing I've ever had. And I know it's too late. I know I don't deserve forgiveness or a second chance. But please. Let me see my daughter. The admission hung in the air. My daughter. The first time he'd said it out loud. Joyce's expression softened slightly. If I let you in there, and you hurt Diane again, if you give her hope and then crush it, if you make promises you won't keep, I will spend every cent I don't have making sure the world knows exactly what kind of man you are. Billionaire or not, I will destroy you. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am. Joyce opened the door. Diane was awake now, sitting up in bed, the baby in her arms. She looked exhausted, beautiful, and utterly shocked. What is he doing here? Her voice was sharp with panic. Mama, what? He asked to see the baby, Joyce said quietly. I think maybe he should. No. Diane held Isabella closer. No, he doesn't get to do this. He doesn't get to show up now and pretend he cares. Diane. Ethan's voice was rough. Please. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and whatever she saw in his face made her pause. 2 minutes, she said finally. You get 2 minutes. Then you leave and you don't come back. Ethan approached slowly, like he was approaching something sacred. Something that might disappear if he moved too quickly. And then he saw her. Isabella. His daughter. She was tiny, impossibly small, wrapped in a pink hospital blanket. Her skin was beautiful, warm and golden. Her hair was dark and soft. And her eyes. God, her eyes. They were open, staring up at him with an alertness that seemed impossible for a newborn. Gray eyes. His eyes. His grandfather's eyes. Eyes that had looked out from Vandross family portraits for generations. Undeniable. Irrefutable. His. Can I? Ethan's voice failed. Can I hold her? Diane hesitated for a long moment, then slowly, carefully, transferred Isabella to his arms. The weight of her was shocking. So light, so fragile, so utterly dependent. Ethan looked down at this tiny person, this life he'd helped create and tried to deny, and something inside him shattered completely. Hi, Isabella, he whispered. I'm your father. The words broke something open in his chest. Tears he didn't know he was capable of spilled down his face. I'm so sorry, he said, looking at Diane. I'm so sorry for everything. For denying you, for the things I said, for being too much of a coward to face the truth. You were right about me. You were right about everything. Diane's own eyes were wet. Why now? Why come here now, after all this time? Because I saw her eyes and I couldn't pretend anymore. Because I've been miserable every day since you walked out of my office. Because. Ethan looked down at Isabella again. Because she's real. And she's mine. And walking away from her would make me exactly the kind of man I swore I'd never become. Your father, Diane said quietly. The empire. The merger. You said acknowledging her would destroy everything. Then let it be destroyed, Ethan said, and meant it. I've spent my whole life building walls and empires and protecting myself from anything messy or real. And what has it gotten me? I'm 32 years old, I have more money than I can spend, and I'm empty. Completely empty. Until her. He stroked Isabella's tiny cheek with one finger. She made a small sound, her hand wrapping around his finger with surprising strength. And Ethan fell completely, irrevocably in love. I want to be her father, he said. I want to be part of her life. I want to, he looked at Diane. I want to make this right. However I can. Whatever it takes. It's not that simple, Diane said. You can't just show up and expect everything to be okay. You hurt me, Ethan. You broke me. I stood in your office and told you I loved you, and you threw it back in my face. I know. And now what? You have some kind of epiphany and I'm supposed to forget 6 months of hell? Forget that I was alone through my entire pregnancy? That I signed away my rights and my voice because you threatened to destroy me? No, Ethan said. I don't expect you to forget any of that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to do better. To be better. For her. Isabella made a small crying sound. Diane took her back, and Ethan felt the loss like a physical ache. The NDA, Diane said. The contract. What about all of that? Void, Ethan said immediately. All of it. I'll have my lawyer draw up new papers acknowledging paternity, establishing support, whatever you want. You can tell anyone, everyone. I don't care about the scandal anymore. Your father will care. The board will care. Let them. Ethan's voice was steel. I'm done living my life according to other people's rules. Even my own. Diane studied him, searching for the lie, the angle, the catch. But Ethan's face was open, raw, honest in a way she'd never seen except for one night 6 months ago. I don't trust you, she said finally. I don't blame you. And I won't let you hurt her. Or me. Not again. I won't. I swear to God, Diane, I won't. People don't change overnight, Ethan. A hospital visit doesn't erase 6 months of abandonment. I know, Ethan said. So let me prove it. Let me show up, consistently, every day. Let me earn your trust back. However long it takes. Diane looked at her daughter, then at Ethan, then at her mother, who was watching the entire exchange with careful eyes. One chance, Diane said finally. You get one chance to prove you mean this. You miss a visit, you disappear, you put your empire ahead of her even once, and you're done. Forever. Do you understand? Yes. And we do this my way. On my terms. You don't get to swoop in and take over because you have money and power. You're not buying a relationship with my daughter. Our daughter, Ethan said quietly. And I agree. Your terms. Whatever you say. Diane nodded slowly. Okay. Then you can come back tomorrow. 2 p.m. And we'll figure this out. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it was a crack in the door. Ethan looked at Isabella one more time, memorizing her face. I'll be here. I promise. As he left the hospital, his phone exploded with messages, his father demanding to know where he was, his assistant listing missed meetings, the board requesting his presence. Ethan ignored all of it. He had a daughter. A beautiful, perfect daughter with his eyes and Diane's strength. And for the first time in his life, the empire didn't matter at all. Ethan showed up at 2 p.m. the next day. And the day after that. And the day after that. For 2 weeks, he was there, at the hospital, then at Diane's apartment in the Bronx. He brought flowers, diapers, groceries. He held Isabella for hours, learning to change her, feed her, soothe her. He listened when Diane talked and stayed quiet when she didn't. He was patient. Gentle. Present. And Diane felt her walls beginning to crack. "He's different," Joyce observed one evening after Ethan had left. "I don't trust it yet, but he's trying." Diane watched through the window as Ethan's town car pulled away. "I know. That's what scares me. Because it would be easier if he was still the cold, heartless man from his office. Easier to hate him, to keep him at arm's length, to protect herself. But this version of Ethan, the one who looked at Isabella like she was his entire world, who didn't flinch at the Bronx apartment or the water-stained ceiling or the sirens outside, was dangerous. This version could break her heart all over again. Then his father found out. Richard Vandross appeared at Diane's door on a Monday morning without warning. She opened it to find an imposing man in a $10,000 suit, flanked by 2 attorneys, looking at her apartment building like it was contaminated. "Miss Stratton," Richard said coldly. "We need to talk." Diane's stomach dropped. "How did you? Did you really think my son could sneak around the Bronx for 2 weeks without me finding out? I have people everywhere." Richard glanced at the attorneys. "May we come in?" It wasn't really a question. Diane stepped aside, her heart hammering. Isabella was napping in her crib. Joyce had taken Kevin to school. She was alone with these predators in expensive suits. Richard surveyed the small apartment with barely concealed disdain. "So this is where my granddaughter is being raised. Charming. What do you want?" Diane asked, forcing steel into her voice. "To solve a problem." Richard sat without being invited, the attorneys flanking him like guards. "My son has apparently lost his mind. He's jeopardizing a multi-billion-dollar merger, embarrassing the family name, and destroying his own future over a mistake." Isabella isn't a mistake. A child born from an inappropriate relationship with household staff? Richard's voice was ice. "That's the definition of a mistake, Miss Stratton. But mistakes can be corrected." One of the attorneys opened a briefcase, removing documents. "We're prepared to offer you $2 million, Richard continued. "In exchange, you will relocate, we're thinking California, perhaps Seattle, and raise the child away from New York. Ethan will have no contact. The Vandross name will never be associated with the child. You'll sign comprehensive NDAs, custody agreements waiving all parental rights, and a binding contract ensuring permanent separation." The number was staggering. Life-changing. Enough to give Isabella every advantage, to move Joyce and Kevin somewhere safe, to finish school without working 3 jobs. Everything Diane had struggled for, handed to her on a silver platter. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then we destroy you." Richard's smile was cruel. "We'll file for full custody, claim you're an unfit mother in an unsafe environment. We have unlimited resources and the best lawyers money can buy. You'll spend every cent fighting us and lose anyway. Or worse, we'll tie you up in court for years while your daughter grows up in foster care, waiting for the case to resolve." "You can't do that." "I can do anything," Richard said. "I've crushed people far more powerful than you, Miss Stratton. You're a low-income single mother with no resources, no family support worth mentioning, living in a slum. Any judge will see that Isabella deserves better." The threat wasn't empty. Diane could see it in his eyes, he would do exactly what he promised. And she would lose. Ethan would never. "Ethan will do what I tell him," Richard interrupted. "He always has. This little rebellion is temporary. Once he understands what's at stake, the merger, his inheritance, his entire future, he'll fall in line. He always does." "He loves her," Diane said desperately. "He loves Isabella." "He loves an idea," Richard corrected. A fantasy of playing house with the help. It'll wear off. It always does. And when it does, you'll be left with nothing but legal bills and a child you can't afford to raise properly. The attorney slid the contracts across the coffee table. $2 million, Miss Stratton. A fresh start somewhere safe. Or a custody battle that destroys you. Choose wisely. Ethan arrived at 3 p.m., expecting his usual afternoon with Isabella. Instead, he found Diane packing. What's going on? Panic edged his voice. Your father was here, Diane said, not looking at him. With lawyers. With threats. Ethan's blood ran cold. What did he say? That you're destroying your life over a mistake. That he'll take Isabella away from me if I don't disappear. That you'll fall in line eventually because you always do. Her voice cracked. Was he right, Ethan? About any of it? No. Diane, whatever he said. He offered me $2 million to move across the country and cut you out of Isabella's life forever. Diane finally looked at him, tears streaming down her face. And he's right about one thing, I can't fight him. I can't afford lawyers. I can't risk losing her in some custody battle. I can't. You're not going anywhere, Ethan said firmly. I won't let him do this. You can't stop him. He's your father, he controls your money, your company, your entire life. He doesn't control me, Ethan said. Not anymore. Then prove it, Diane challenged. Because right now, I have to choose between taking his money and protecting my daughter from being ripped away from me. What am I supposed to do, Ethan? Trust that you'll stand up to him? You couldn't even acknowledge Isabella 6 months ago. The words hit like physical blows. I'm not that man anymore. How do I know that? Diane's voice rose. How do I know you won't choose the empire the second things get hard? Your father is offering me security, Ethan. Real security. Money to give Isabella a life I could never afford. How do I turn that down on the hope that you've actually changed? Ethan reached for her, but she pulled away. I need you to leave, Diane whispered. I need to think. Just go. Please. Diane. Go. Ethan left, his world crumbling around him. In his car, Ethan called his father. I was wondering when you'd phone, Richard answered. Have you come to your senses? Stay away from Diane, Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet. Stay away from my daughter. If you ever threaten them again. You'll what? Richard laughed. Quit? Walk away from everything I built for you? You don't have the spine, Ethan. You never have. You'll make noise, you'll feel righteous for a few days, and then you'll realize what you're throwing away. And you'll fall in line. Just like always. I'm not you, Ethan said. No, you're worse. You're weak enough to feel guilty about it. But the outcome is the same, you'll choose power over love, legacy over family. It's in your blood. It's who we are. The line went dead. Ethan sat in his car outside Diane's building, staring at her window. His father was wrong. He had to be wrong. But as Ethan looked at his phone, 18 missed calls from the board, emergency meetings about the merger, his entire professional life imploding, he wondered if Richard was right. Was he strong enough to choose Diane and Isabella over everything else? Or would he prove to be exactly the man his father raised him to be? Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse, the same place where this had all begun, and made the hardest decision of his life. At 8 a.m., he walked into his father's office without knocking. Richard looked up from his Wall Street Journal, unsurprised. Here to beg for a compromise? No, Ethan said. I'm here to tell you I'm done. Done with what? All of it. The merger. The company. Your legacy. Ethan's voice was steady. I'm resigning from Vandross Technologies, effective immediately. I'm liquidating my personal assets, setting up a trust for Isabella, and stepping away from the family business entirely. Richard's expression didn't change. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not. I've already called the lawyers. Papers will be filed by end of business today." Ethan met his father's eyes. "You were right about one thing, I've always chosen the empire. Always done what you expected. But not anymore. I choose them. Diane and Isabella. Even if Diane never forgives me, even if she takes your money and leaves, I choose to be a man who tried rather than a coward who ran." "You'll have nothing," Richard said coldly. "No company, no position, no legacy. I'll have my daughter. That's everything. The board will fight this. Let them. My shares are mine to do with as I please. You taught me that." Ethan turned toward the door. "And Dad? If you ever threaten Diane or Isabella again, I'll go to every media outlet in the country and tell them exactly what kind of man you are. Your reputation, your merger, your precious legacy, I'll burn it all down. Do we understand each other?" For the first time in Ethan's life, he saw something like respect flicker in his father's eyes. "You're really willing to throw everything away for them?" "They're not something I'm throwing everything away for," Ethan said quietly. "They're what I'm choosing. There's a difference." He left without looking back. Diane was feeding Isabella when someone knocked at her door. She opened it expecting Ethan. Instead, she found Liam Chen. "Can I come in?" he asked. "I promise I'm not here to threaten you. I'm actually here to help." Cautiously, Diane let him in. Liam sat, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I don't know if Ethan's told you what he did this morning." "I haven't talked to him since yesterday. He quit. Walked away from Vandross Technologies, his inheritance, everything. He's liquidating his personal fortune to set up a trust for Isabella, and he told his father to go to hell." Liam smiled. "It was spectacular, honestly." Diane's heart stuttered. "He what?" "He chose you. Both of you. Over the empire, over his father, over everything he spent his life building." Liam leaned forward. "Look, I've known Ethan since we were 18. He's always been controlled, calculated, never made a move that wasn't strategic. What he did today, that was terrifying and stupid and completely sincere. That was love. Or guilt," Diane whispered. "Maybe both," Liam acknowledged. "But I've watched him these past 2 weeks. The way he looks at Isabella, the way he talks about you, that's not guilt. That's a man who found something real for the first time in his life and is willing to lose everything to keep it." Diane looked at Isabella, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "His father offered me $2 million to disappear. I heard. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know," Diane admitted. "It's more money than I'll ever see otherwise. It's security for Isabella, for my family. How do I turn that down? By asking yourself what Isabella needs more, money, or a father who loves her enough to give up an empire for her." Liam stood. "Richard Vandross is a bastard, but his threat was empty. You have something he can't fight." "What's that?" "You have Ethan. Really have him. And Richard knows that if he pushes this to court, Ethan will destroy the family name to protect you. That's why Richard's offering money instead. He's trying to make you leave voluntarily because he knows he can't force it." Liam headed for the door. "Don't let Richard win, Diane. Don't let fear make your choice." After he left, Diane sat with Isabella, thinking about everything. About Ethan in the hospital, tears on his face as he held his daughter for the first time. About 2 weeks of him showing up every day, learning to be a father, never complaining about the Bronx or the tiny apartment or the chaos. About him walking away from everything for them. Maybe Liam was right. Maybe this was real. Maybe Ethan had finally chosen love over legacy. When Ethan knocked at 6 p.m., Diane opened the door. "I heard what you did," she said quietly. "Liam has a big mouth." Ethan looked exhausted but lighter somehow, like he'd put down a weight he'd been carrying for years. Did you mean it? All of it? Every word. I'm done with that life, Diane. Done with my father, done with the company, done with choosing empire over everything real. He met her eyes. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know walking away from money doesn't erase what I did. But I need you to know, I choose you. I choose Isabella. Whatever that looks like, however long it takes for you to trust me, I choose this. Diane studied his face, searching for the lie, the angle. She found only truth. I'm terrified, she admitted. Terrified of believing you and being wrong. Terrified of trusting you and having you leave again. I know. I'm terrified too. But I'd rather be terrified with you than empty without you. Diane took a breath. Made her choice. Okay, she said. One day at a time. No promises. No expectations. Just showing up. For her. For us. Can you do that? I can do that, Ethan said. I will do that. Then come meet your daughter. Properly this time. Ethan stepped into the apartment, and for the first time since this began, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The hardest part wasn't over. But for the first time, there was hope. And hope was everything. 3 months later, everything came to a head. Ethan had been true to his word, showing up every single day, learning to be a father, building something real with Diane and Isabella. They weren't a couple, not exactly, but they were becoming something. A family, maybe. Then Richard Vandross played his final card. The lawsuit arrived on a Friday morning. Richard was suing for grandparents' rights, claiming Ethan was mentally unstable, evidenced by his erratic resignation and abandonment of family responsibilities, and that Isabella needed the stability only the Vandross family could provide. He's claiming you had a breakdown, Diane said, reading through the papers with shaking hands. That you're not competent to make decisions about Isabella's welfare. Ethan's face was stone. He's trying to take her from both of us. The court date was set for 2 weeks away. Richard had assembled a team of Manhattan's most vicious attorneys. Ethan had walked away from the family fortune, which meant he was fighting with limited resources. We can't win this, Diane whispered. Can we? We have to, Ethan said. The courtroom was cold and intimidating. Richard sat with his legal army, looking every inch the powerful patriarch. Ethan and Diane had one lawyer, a family court specialist Liam had recommended who worked on contingency. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Justice Patricia Morrison, reviewed the paperwork with an unreadable expression. Richard's lead attorney stood. Your Honor, we're here because a child's welfare is at stake. Ethan Vandross, after a lifetime of stability and success, suddenly abandoned his career, his family responsibilities, and his own mental health, all for an inappropriate relationship with former household staff. We believe he's experiencing a psychological crisis that makes him unfit to participate in childcare decisions. That's ridiculous, Ethan started. Mr. Vandross, Justice Morrison said sharply. You'll have your turn. Richard's attorney continued, painting Ethan as unstable, Diane as opportunistic, and Isabella as a child in danger. They presented Ethan's resignation as evidence of mental collapse, his withdrawal from society as concerning isolation. It was brutal and effective. When Ethan's turn came, their lawyer did her best, but the resources were mismatched. Then Ethan stood. Your Honor, may I speak? Justice Morrison considered. Briefly. Ethan looked at his father. You're right about one thing, I did have a breakdown. But not the kind you're claiming. I had a moral breakdown. A crisis of character. I spent 32 years building walls and empires and protecting myself from anything real. And when something real finally broke through, I ran from it. I denied my daughter. I threatened the woman I loved. I chose legacy over love because that's what I was taught to do. He turned to the judge. My father is here claiming I'm unstable because I chose to be a father over being a CEO. But I've never been more stable, more certain, more sane in my entire life. For the first time, I'm making choices based on love instead of fear. I'm not asking this court to give me custody or power over Isabella's life. I'm asking for the chance to be her father. To show up. To love her. That's all. Justice Morrison's expression softened slightly. Mr. Richard Vandross, why are you really here? Richard stood. My granddaughter deserves the Vandross legacy. Resources, education, opportunities. She has a father who loves her, the judge interrupted. A mother who's cared for her since birth. A home, however modest. What she doesn't have is you in her life. So I'll ask again, why are you really here? Richard's mask slipped. Because my son is throwing away everything I built for him. Everything our family stands for. Ah. Justice Morrison leaned back. So this isn't about Isabella's welfare. It's about control. Your Honor. I've seen enough. The judge's voice was firm. Mr. Richard Vandross, your petition for grandparents' rights is denied. There is no evidence of unfitness, instability, or danger to the child. What I see is a father trying to control his adult son through the courts, and I won't be party to it. Richard's face went red. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Justice Morrison said. And if you file another frivolous lawsuit, I'll sanction you personally. This court exists to protect children, not to wage family power struggles. We're adjourned. The gavel fell. Diane burst into tears. Ethan pulled her close, his own eyes wet. They'd won. Richard stormed out without a word, his attorney scrambling after him. Outside the courthouse, Ethan stopped his father on the steps. It's over, Dad, Ethan said quietly. I'm done fighting you. Done trying to be who you want me to be. I love you, but I love them more. And that has to be enough. Richard looked at his son, really looked at him, and for a moment, something human flickered in his eyes. You're throwing away your birthright, Richard said. No, Ethan replied. I'm choosing a different legacy. One built on love instead of power. And maybe someday, you'll understand that. Richard walked away without responding. Ethan returned to Diane, who was holding Isabella against her chest. Is it really over? Diane asked. It's really over, Ethan confirmed. Diane looked up at him, this man who'd broken her heart and then spent months putting it back together. I love you, she said. I fought it, I didn't want to, but I do. I love you. Ethan's breath caught. I love you too. I've loved you since that first night. I was just too much of a coward to admit it. So what now? Diane asked. Ethan smiled. Now we go home. Together. And we figure out the rest as we go. He kissed her there on the courthouse steps, with Isabella between them and their whole future spread out ahead. Imperfect. Complicated. Real. And absolutely worth fighting for. 1 year later. Diane stood in the kitchen of their new home, not a penthouse, not the Bronx apartment, but something in between. A brownstone in Brooklyn with a yard where Isabella could play and enough room for Joyce and Kevin to visit whenever they wanted. Ethan had used what remained of his personal savings wisely. He'd started a small tech consulting firm, something modest that let him work from home most days. Diane had finished her nursing degree and just accepted a position at Mount Sinai, the same hospital where Isabella was born. They were building something real. Something theirs. Dada. Isabella toddled across the floor, her gray eyes bright with joy. At 16 months, she was walking, talking, and completely fearless. Ethan scooped her up, spinning her around. There's my girl. Diane watched them together, her heart full. This was what she'd dreamed of that night a year and a half ago, not the money or the status, but this. A father who showed up. A partner who chose love over everything else. Ready? Ethan asked, Isabella on his hip. Ready, Diane confirmed. They were meeting Richard for lunch. The first time since the courthouse. It had been Ethan's idea, an olive branch he'd extended every month for a year until Richard finally, grudgingly accepted. The restaurant was neutral territory. Richard arrived exactly on time, looking older somehow. Smaller. "Ethan," he said stiffly. Then, with visible effort, "Diane." "Dad," Ethan replied. "Thanks for coming." They sat in awkward silence until Isabella, oblivious to the tension, reached for Richard with chubby hands. "Grandpa," she declared confidently. Richard froze. "She knows who I am?" "We show her pictures," Diane said quietly. "Tell her stories. We wanted her to know her grandfather, even if you didn't want to know her." Something cracked in Richard's expression. He tentatively took Isabella's hand, and she gripped his finger with that same surprising strength she'd shown since birth. "She has the Vandross eyes," Richard said, his voice rough. "She has a lot of you in her," Ethan agreed. "The good parts." Richard looked at his son. "I was wrong. About the lawsuit, about trying to control you, about everything." The admission clearly cost him. "I know," Ethan said simply. "I thought I was protecting the legacy. Protecting you from making a mistake. But watching you this year, seeing what you've built," Richard's voice caught. "You're happier than I've ever seen you. And I robbed myself of a year with my granddaughter because I was too stubborn to admit it. You're here now," Diane said. "That's what matters." "Can I?" Richard cleared his throat. "Can I be part of her life? Not control it, not dictate it, just be her grandfather?" Ethan looked at Diane. She nodded. "We'd like that," Ethan said. "On our terms." "But yes." Isabella babbled something incomprehensible and patted Richard's face. Despite himself, Richard smiled, a real smile, soft and genuine. "She's remarkable," he said. "She is," Ethan agreed. "Just like her mother." He reached for Diane's hand under the table, and she squeezed back. That evening, after Isabella was asleep, Ethan found Diane on the back porch. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Diane said. "A year and a half ago, I was scrubbing floors in your penthouse, invisible. Now look at us." "You were never invisible," Ethan said. "I just wasn't brave enough to see you. And now? Now I see you every day. And I plan to keep seeing you. Forever, if you'll let me." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Diane's breath caught. "Ethan." "I know we're not traditional," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple, beautiful ring. "I know we did everything backward and messy. But I love you, Diane Stratton. I love the life we're building, the family we're creating. I love waking up next to you and falling asleep knowing you're there. Will you marry me?" Diane looked at the ring, at this man who'd broken her heart and then spent every day since earning it back. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her like it was the first time and the millionth time all at once. "I promise," he said against her lips, "to choose you. Every single day. For the rest of my life." "I'm going to hold you to that," Diane said. "Please do." 6 months later, they married in a small ceremony in Joyce's church. Isabella was the flower girl, dropping petals everywhere except the aisle. Kevin walked Diane down the aisle. Liam was Ethan's best man. And Richard sat in the front row, holding his granddaughter, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't the society wedding Richard had once imagined for his son. It was better. It was real. As Ethan and Diane exchanged vows, promising to love each other through whatever came next, Isabella shouted "Mama! Dada!" and everyone laughed. This was their family. Imperfect, complicated, built on second chances and forgiveness. And it was absolutely perfect. Years later, when Isabella was old enough to ask about her parents' story, they told her the truth. About a night that changed everything. About mistakes and redemption. About a father who almost walked away but chose love instead. About a mother who was strong enough to demand better and brave enough to forgive. So you and Daddy had a rough start? Isabella asked, her gray eyes, her father's eyes, curious and kind. The roughest, Diane confirmed. But you figured it out, Isabella said. We did, Ethan agreed. Because some things are worth fighting for. And you, sweetheart, were worth everything. Isabella hugged them both. I love you, Mama. I love you, Daddy. We love you too, baby girl, they said together. Outside, the Brooklyn evening settled into peaceful darkness. Inside, the Vandross family, built on love, not legacy, was exactly where they belonged. Together. Home. Forever. And that's how it's done. A story of redemption, love, second chances, and family. What did you think? Did Ethan earn his happy ending? Did Diane make the right choice? I want to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. And if you love this journey, please subscribe to the channel. I've got so many more incredible stories coming your way. Hit that like button, share this with someone who loves a good redemption story, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for being here with me. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Red Heart.